Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why some parents' advice seems to land perfectly with their kids, while for others it is like talking to a brick wall? Does it matter if it is mom or dad giving the advice? Well, this new study dives deep into why parenting can work wonders for some teenagers, and not so much for others. And it turns out the answer might be hiding in plain sight within the family itself. So, what is the big question here for decades? Scientists have studied how parenting affects kids, especially when they hit those tricky teenage years. We know that things like parents being warm and understanding or explaining rules can help teenagers avoid problems like anxiety and sadness. But here is the puzzle. Why doesn't the same parenting approach work the same way for every single family? Why is it that sometimes a loving mom's hug might help, but in another family that same hug might not do much, or even have the opposite effect? This is what the researchers wanted to figure out. They wanted to find out what makes parenting effects different from one family to another. To tackle this big question, the researchers looked at a huge number of possible reasons, called moderators, that could explain why parenting effects are so different. Imagine you are trying to find the one ingredient that makes a recipe turn out differently every time, even with the same core ingredients. They looked at not just one or two things, but a whopping 129 different factors. Everything from the child's personality to how involved the father is, how much stress the parents are under, and even how much say the teenager has in family decisions. They used a massive data set from Australia following over 7,000 teenagers and their parents for several years. This is like a super detailed diary of family life and teenage struggles. So how did they do it? They used a special kind of math model called random intercept cross-lagged panel models. Now, that sounds complicated, but think of it this way. It helps them separate what is pretty much the same about a family over time, like the stable personality of a parent, from the actual day-to-day changes in parenting behavior and in the teenager's mood. They wanted to see if a change in how a parent acts, like being warmer than usual, actually leads to a change in how the teenager feels, like having fewer sad thoughts. After they established these basic cause and effect relationships, they brought in their machine learning tool called SEM forests. This is like a super smart detective that can sift through all 129 potential moderators to pinpoint the most influential ones. It is like finding the few needles in a haystack that really make a difference. And what did this super detective find? The biggest surprise was that the family context mattered way more than they expected. Not just the individual teenager. They looked at three main parenting practices: warmth, explaining rules, inductive reasoning, and not getting angry often. On average, all these practices seem to help reduce teens internalizing problems, meaning they helped with sadness and anxiety. But here is the crucial part, that average was hiding a ton of variation. Take maternal warmth, for example. It wasn't a simple good for everyone thing. In some families, a mother's warmth was super protective, like a shield against sadness. But in other families, it actually seemed to make things worse, leading to more internalizing problems. This is a huge finding because it challenges the idea that just being warm is always the answer. So, what made the difference? The most important factors, the strongest moderators, were all about the immediate family environment. Things like how involved the father was in the child's life and how much stress or difficulty the parents themselves were experiencing. Specifically, if parents were going through a tough time, like having lots of life difficulties, then the positive effects of good parenting, like warmth, seemed to get weaker. It was like the stress made the good parenting less effective. For maternal warmth, the number one moderator was father involvement, even though the effect was pretty flat, meaning more father involvement didn't directly change the impact of mom's warmth. It was still the most important factor. And then came parental life difficulties for both mothers and fathers. When parents had more problems and stresses in their lives, the protective effect of a mother's warmth was significantly reduced. That is huge. It means that a parent's own well-being and the presence and involvement of the other parent are critical. Interestingly, father involvement was also the top moderator for paternal warmth. So even when the dad was the one showing warmth, how involved he was in general still played a key role. This suggests that the system of the family, the interplay between parents, is really what shapes how parenting advice lands. They also looked at fathers' low anger, meaning when fathers were less angry with their kids. Again, father involvement was the top moderator, and in this case, its effect was positive, meaning father involvement amplified the benefit of fathers being less angry. This highlights the unique role fathers play and the importance of their engagement. What does all this mean? The study strongly suggests that we can't really talk about average parenting effects anymore. The idea of a one-size-fits-all approach to parenting, or even to understanding how parenting impacts kids, is just not accurate. The effectiveness of parenting practices is highly context dependent, and that context is primarily the immediate family environment. The microsystem. What is really fascinating is that factors traditionally studied, like the teenager's personality or even their gender, weren't the most important players in moderating these parenting effects. It was things like family cohesion, how well parents and kids get along, and family adversity, like parent stress levels. When adolescents had more say in family decisions, that actually strengthened the positive effects of parenting. It seems giving teens a voice matters. This has huge practical implications. It means that when we try to help parents, or when parents try to help their kids, we need to look beyond just teaching a specific parenting technique. We need to consider the whole family system. Are the parents under a lot of stress? How is the co-parenting relationship? Does the teenager feel like they have a voice? These factors, the study suggests, are crucial for understanding why parenting works or doesn't work. Now, like any study, this one has its limits. They looked at a lot of moderators, but not every single possible one. Things like genetics or sibling relationships weren't included. Also, this study was in Australia, so cultural differences across countries weren't explored, and the measurements were taken every 2 years, so they might have missed some faster, day-to-day changes. But overall, this research makes a powerful case. It tells us that the nuances of daily family life, the father's involvement, the parents' own struggles, and even how much autonomy teens have within the family, are the real keys to understanding how parenting shapes adolescent emotional well-being. So, next time you are thinking about parenting, remember, it is not just about what you do, but about the entire family ecosystem you are part of. What do you think of these findings? Have you noticed these dynamics in your own family or in families? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more insights into the fascinating world of psychology. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.